The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today, our panel will be answering listener emails and questions. And we have a question from Danny, who lives in Boston, Massachusetts. Danny asks, you all say that the current Republican Party isn't really a conservative movement. If they aren't conservatives, the Republicans, how are you defining them now?
Ooh.
So
That's a great question.
Trumpist. I think it's a Trumpist party.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, there's nothing conservative about what Trump did in his first term. Trump is the most socialist president we've ever seen in our lives. More so probably than FDR. And the Republican Party used to be for low taxes and less government. Trump is going to get in your face about everything that you do. That's not small government. Getting involved in people's sex lives and in every aspect of their life is not classic Republican or conservatism. Nor is Republicans used to be for free trade, not protectionist. That was always Democrats who were protectionist. So that's changed. I'd say that there's quite a bit. I mean. When you think about Ronald Reagan as sort of the model of the conservative Republican, Trump is the opposite of Ronald Reagan in a lot of ways. So I think that we're on good, firm ground when we say that this Republican Party is not a conservative party at all.
And I think I made mention of this in a previous podcast. There really is no Republican Party. This is supposed to be a two-party system, which I have to admit I never was really happy with because it was either A or B. I always liked the system where there was a bunch of different parties that you could choose from. And because even the Democrats nor the Republicans, their entire platform, you cannot be totally on board with it. You just can't. There's going to be things you're going to have to hold your nose and say, yeah, okay, fine. Even people in the party leadership understands that. There's going to be things in the platform that, hey, you just got to hold your nose. That's fine because it's a matter of compromise. Trump's party is not a matter of compromise. There is no compromise in this party. It is not Republican. This is why the Republicans are going to have such a hard time governing over the next 2 years, controlling the Senate and controlling the House of Representatives, because there are still some Republicans in there who are not Trumpists. And a student asked me one time, "Is Trump a fascist?" I'm not even so sure that moniker would qualify at this point in time. This is something completely different in my mind. I don't think you can say conservatism, liberalism, neoliberalism, neoconservatism, all those other different political ideologies that exist out there. I honestly cannot point to, and I think this is the question that's being asked, which one is he most like? I don't think he's kind of like a hodgepodge of a whole bunch of everything bad about all of them. And it's really everything bad. I mean, I remember when we were in Berner's class, he gave out that handout that had all of the different, at the time, political ideologies and what they stood for and what they meant. And if you go back to that and you really look at it, it's hard to say, yeah, well, he's that. Well, maybe he's that. He's kind of, as I say, he's a combination of a lot of different political ideologies kind of thrown in as a hodgepodge. And the fact is that some of these ideologies don't even mesh together. I mean, they would be considered complete opposites. So I think Scott's attitude of we're going to call them trumpets or Trumpers or Trumpies or whatever you want to call it, I think that's what it is. And I think that you've got the Republican Party right now is very, very small. I would say the real Republican Party, probably out of the however many they got, 220 seats. I'll bet you the real Republican Party probably holds about 50. And that's going to be a stumbling block. And as we mentioned before, now they're attacking Mike Johnson, who Scott thinks has the most punchable face in America. Okay.
So I just have a question. So you were saying before in an earlier, when we were talking earlier, that you're anticipating a government shutdown. And I was also wondering whether you would even consider the Trump party as a party. So it's as you were speaking, Mark, I was thinking almost like of a circle, like a core within an outer circle. So if the real Republican Party, the real conservative party, is about 50, right? Like the pit of a peach, for instance, right? Or the core of the earth. And then around that, you've got a larger, or if you want to look at a Venn diagram or something like that, another entity, which would be the MAGA movement or the Trump element. And maybe then there's some overlap, part of the Venn diagram. Would you even call the part of under Trump's control a party rather than a movement?
It's like a militia.
What do you see about the potential government shutdown because of the distinctions?
Good, Scott. I mean, first of all, is it a party? No, it's a cult. Democrats are a party. Republicans are a party. Libertarians are a party. Greens are a party. Yes, this is a cult. I mean, when they say "Make America Great Again," they can't even tell you what that means, and they have different definitions of what makes America great again. It all depends on the individual. So, you've got this, again, it's a hodgepodge of all these different ideologies, and whether you like it or not, you can't please them all. So I just, no, as far as the government shutdown, I think that the fact that you still have some Republicans, I think it's going to, I think it's going to cause an issue.
Scott, what do you say?
I'm basically nothing to add to that. I mean, it is a cult. That's what it is. And a militia in waiting. See how bad it gets.
So then I have one further question. What happens, in your view, to the real Republican Party? I mean, does it stay like a tiny cluster, or do you see that over time, depending on what happens with the cult, it may eventually fall apart or cease to exist?
So we've actually discussed this in the past, and I'm going to stick with my answer from then, which is that when this is all over, people are going to deny that they were ever even a part of it. That when it ends, it's going to end. That nobody can replace Donald Trump for the Trumpers, and there's not going to be another person like him coming down the pike that will be able to take the MAGA movement and keep it what it is becoming, and that there's going to be between now and then a lot of chaos, disruption, pain. People are going to decide, I think, at some point or another, that they hate the way it's going. His hardcore people won't ever blame him for it. They'll find other ways to blame others. But that when it's over and Republicans come out of the woodwork and declare themselves a non-authoritarian, non-cult political party that believes in small government, low taxes, free trade, that they'll deny that they ever supported him in the first place.
I agree with that. And I was just actually looking at one of the diagrams that was sent about political ideologies. And I would say, if I'm going to try to make the definition, we are in between the father knows best state, which is actually more toward authoritarian, which goes very close to being a psychotic dictatorship. And we're also, at this point in time, back to Scott's point, tyranny by the majority. That majority is going to deny the majority when this goes south. And tyranny by the majority is actually a libertarian philosophy, which are two totally different ends of the spectrum. And that's why I say it's a hodgepodge of these ideologies. And Scott's right. The majority that voted for Trump voted because they were voting in what they thought was their own best interest. And a working democracy, yes, your interests are important. There's no doubt about it. But society's interests are more important. That is part of being a real citizen, doing things for the state that betters everyone, not just you. And the thing I always got was is half the things that Trump's put out there isn't going to benefit 90% of the people that voted for him, and they just were unable to figure that out. So that would be my best attempt at putting a political ideology onto it. But I think Trumpism is eventually will probably find its way, and it will probably be somewhere, I would think, toward authoritarian.
Yeah, and I would add another wrinkle to that, which would be that we're on our way to becoming a rentier state, and that rentier capitalism is something that we see in Elon Musk, right? His rent-seeking behavior, I think, is very clear, and that we're entering a period where these like really, really wealthy tech bros like Peter Thiel and Andreessen and others think that they know best because they're so wealthy. They must understand that, you know, what the American people need more than the American people, and that the wealthier they get, the more they'll be able to guide the country, because Elon Musk can pay, what was it, $277 million to elect his candidate of choice, and that they'll do away with America as we know it now and create something that's more along the lines of the directorate that followed the reign of terror in France before France became an empire under Napoleon, and that there'll be this sort of wise man quintuple or group that makes decisions for everybody because given their wealth, they know what's best for everybody else. So if an Elon Musk says, you know, I need more money because we've got to go to Mars by the end of the decade, you know, he'll get that money. And it's, you know, crony capitalism, rentier capitalism, whatever you want to call it, is where we're headed as a political future.
Well, it's also a catastrophic. Oh, I always have trouble pronouncing this word. A cacistocracy. There we go.
Yeah.
It makes me very concerned how rapidly we're moving in this direction, and it makes me also very worried about how the relationships with our allies, particularly Canada, for example, and Mexico, our closest allies, literally, can be repaired once Trumpism is gone or even in 4 years, once the trust has been shattered that we've been building in slowly, and neighborliness is gone. That can be extremely difficult to restore, if it's even possible to restore it.
I think if there's one thing that it is kind of across the board, I would call it the politics of zero-sum thinking, that there's only one right answer to these simple questions. But those questions are never simple. They're always complex. And I think that that probably is one of the reasons why Trump got elected, was because he basically presented, oh, these are all simple things to fix. And, you know, the average person was like, oh, yeah, okay. You know, it's not that complex. But when you get right down into the nitty gritty of it, it's these are complex issues that we face. So, yeah, maybe we should call it the politics of zero-sum thinking, even that thinking is wrong.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the last time that happened was like the Gilded Age, right?
That's correct.
And you had in politics back in those days what they used to call the spoils system, and to the victor went the spoils, and that led to the President Grant's two scandal-ridden terms. It led to the deal that made Rutherford B. Hayes president. It led to the Grant came back after touring Europe for 4 years or 3.5 years, and they wanted to bring him back again because they realized, and by they I mean there was a New York Senator, Roscoe Conkling, who believed in the spoils system, and at that time the New York port was so big that 70% of the economy ran through the port of New York, and Conkling was the one who controlled that patronage, decided who got that money, including himself and his cronies. And we're in a similar situation now with all of these tech guys who want cryptocurrency and want free-handed AI and no regulations on what they do and how they earn their money. Certainly no FTC spoiling deals, right? As we've seen the last couple of years. If Lena Khan had 4 more years, would she be able to break up Google a little bit and cause them to have to sell off some of the assets that we take for granted from Google? Same thing with Amazon, same thing with Microsoft. So we're in a Gilded Age type period in our history where as you say, zero-sum game, where, if you're not on the winning side, you got nothing, right? And, yep, zero-sum mentality. It's a big club and you ain't in it. as George Carlin once put it.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, that age brought us Chester Arthur,
right? Who was one of Conkling's guys.
Who was one of his guys. And I think he was like the commissioner of the Port Authority. He was a politician, commissioner of the Port Authority. But when Chester Arthur became president, he turned on Conklin.
He did, yeah.
He turned on him and said, "No, we're not doing that anymore," much to Roscoe's, chagrin. But old Chester, he basically stood up and said, "No, we're not doing that anymore."
Right, and then you had Teddy Roosevelt and the Trust Busters and the whole, yeah.
And that's where then it really got going. So hopefully we answered that one. Not really, but
it's a zero-sum party.
We gave it our shot.
Yep. So thank you for the question, and we will see you again next time on the Nova Society.
We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert, cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com. And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd like to thank all of our listeners. Without you and your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and for all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we hope to see you again next time.